All right, so I am going to walk through the 4 functions on the quiz. So I'll talk about each of them for at the high level. We'll go through the code and then show some examples. So for istar, we have a function that's going to take in a string and return a Boolean. So the conditions that we're looking to meet here are that one, the string starts with a T, ends with R, and has A's in the middle. Okay, so there's 3 things we're checking for. And another thing to make note of is that since we need a T to begin with, an A to end with, and at least one A in the middle, that means we know our string has to have at least the length of 3. All right, so with that in mind, let's go to some code. All right. Alrighty, so the first thing that we can check, since we know our string has to have at least 3 letters in it in order to satisfy this condition, is right off the bat, we can say if the length is less than 3, then you just want to return false. All right, and also, as you can see, I have some skeleton functions set up just to get us started quicker, but these should all be pretty straightforward here. All right, so that's the first condition that we know will cause us to return false. But now we want to check, is the first character equal to a T? So what we can do here is say if the value of our string at index 0 is not equal to a T, okay, we want to return false. So that means it's not tar. Additionally, if the end of our string, is not equal to R, we also would like to return false. Okay, so far we've knocked out both 1 and 2 from that list I showed in the beginning. And so now what we want to do is loop through the middle. So normally when we've seen these patterns of looping through a string, we have this I counter variable that starts at 0. But here, since we already checked that 0 was a T, so if we made it to this point, we know the string at index 0 is a T, we can just go ahead and start at 1 to start checking for some A's. All right, so now we want to loop from 1 until not the length of the string, because that will take us to that R, but we want to stop 1 before, because everything from 1 up to 1 before the last should be an A. And that's kind of confusing to say in words, but we can do an example. So now inside this loop, we just want to make sure that we're only seeing A's. So if we don't see an A, that means we want to return false. All right, otherwise we can just keep on looping. All right, so that is istar. I can show a little example here. Okay. Yeah, so we can do, so if we did istar, let's try a passing one first. Okay, so if we called istar with this string, we'd check here, is the length less than 3? It's not, because the length of this is 4. And then we check, is S at 0 not equal to T? That's not true, we have a T. And then we check, is S at the length -1? So if the length is 4, that means we're looking at index 0, 1, 2, 3. But that is an R, so we're good. All right. So then we set up our loop with I starting at 1. And we check, is I less than the length of a string -1? So we're really just checking, is I less than 3? And so 1 is less than 3, so we go in this loop and we check, Is the string at this current index not A? We're good, it's still an A. So that means we can update I and keep moving. So 2 is still less than 3, so we're good on the looping condition, and the current index is still an A, so we're good to keep moving. And so then I becomes 3, but now 3 is not less than 3, so we jump down and return true. So the result of this is true. All right, so just to show really quickly, if we just wanted to show one that would fail, okay, we could just do is tar of TC, okay, TCR, pretend that's a lowercase r, okay. So this is fine, this is also fine, but then we set up our I at 1, and we're looping from I is less than 1 up to 2, since our length here is 3. And it says, is S of I not equal to A? This if statement is entered because this is not equal to A, and we return false. All right, so that is tar. So the next function we have is boot. So boot takes in a string and 2 integers that specify the range that you want to kick out, boot out of your string. All right, so let's just remind ourselves how we index a string. So these are our indices for this string apple. So with this example function call, we would remove index 2 up to 3, which is just these 2 characters. So the result of our function would be, our function call here would be ape. So if we're wanting to think of the steps that we'll need, so we want to, first we want to include everything before start, and we want to include everything after the end. All right, so let's jump into some code for this problem. All righty, here we go. So I already have the skeleton function set up with the result just being empty string. So we want to set up a counter variable. We know we're going to be looping. So the first step that I wrote down on the last screen was that we want to include everything before the start. So that means we're going to go from 0, which is the start, up until the start index of things we want to boot out of here. Okay, so as long as we're before the start, we're gonna update our result to have the current character in our string S. And then we also want to update our counter variable. All right, so at this point, yeah, okay. So at this point, if we were doing the same example from before, result would look like this. Result would be A and P, because remember, we had start being 2 and end being 3. So I would have gone from 0 to give us the A, and then I would have gone to 1 to give us this P. And then we have 2, and we are at the case where we have 2 is less than 2, that's not true anymore. So we exit the loop. So far we've gotten here, and we just want to include this E now. So at this point, I is 2, but we want I to be pointing to the character after the end. So what we can do here is exactly that. We can just say, now that we're done getting the things before the start, we can go ahead and reset I to be 1 after the end. So then we can say, while I is less than the length of the string, so we just want to get everything trailing. So like if we had done a different example, like if this had been, oops, sorry, I always do that. If this had been like a bunch of E's on the end, we would want to go and include all of those E's. So while I is less than the length of the string, exactly the same thing we did before, just tack on those characters that we want to keep incrementing I, and we're done. So we can clearly see we're literally turning the steps in English into code. So this loop includes everything before the index, before the range we want to kick out, and this loop is everything after. All right. Sorry, 1 sec. Yeah. So if we just want to finish our Apple example, so what I have on the screen, let me just erase this stuff. Okay, so the state of everything I have on the screen is where we left off on line 29, or at the end when we exited this loop. Yes, so we're right here now. All right, so we got the A and the P, and now we set I to be the end plus 1, so that is 4, because our n was 3. And we say, while 4 is less than the length of our string, which is true because the length of our string is 5. So we tack on that character, which gives us that E. We increase I to be 5, and now we have the condition for our loop becomes false because 5 is not less than 5, and we return our result, which is just 8. All right, the next function is sum inputs. Okay, so this one's a little different because we do not have any parameters. But what we want to do is we want to continuously ask for user input. So this word continuously should make you think we're probably going to be looping. And then as we ask for this input, we want to keep a running total, all right, which is the sum that we eventually want to return. And then the third thing we want to keep in mind is we want to stop at -1. So if someone enters -1, we know we want to stop our function and return the result where we're at. All right, so if we want to jump into some code, let's see. All right, so again, I have just a skeleton here. So our sum starts at 0, and what we want to return is this string that reads sum is, and then we concatenate the string version of our integer sum. All right, so we want to continuously ask for some user input. So since we're just continuously doing something, we're not looping through a string or anything, our looping condition should just be some Boolean flag or Boolean value. We can call this anything. I'll call it keep going. And we just start that off to be true. So then in our loop, we just say while keep going, we ask the user for a value. All right. Cool. And so, all right, so as this is right now, we're just going to keep going forever. This is definitely an infinite loop, and we're just asking someone for a number over and over and over again. But we know that if this integer that we receive back is -1, oops, that we want our keep going condition to be false. So this will stop our loop. Otherwise, we can add this value to our sum. Right, so that's all there is to this one. All right, and I am gonna start a REPL so we can see how this one works. All right. Okay, so we've imported it and we just want to call it. So 4, 2, okay. So that is what's going on with that one. All right, so the last function is strip, which is definitely a tricky one. So I think the best way to tackle this one is to think about it with an example first. So if we called strip, so strip takes in some string you want to strip white space from, in this case just a space, and then it also takes in a string value that represents the side you want to strip from. So I'm just gonna do underscores to represent spaces here because it would be very hard to tell otherwise. So let's pretend we have the string cat that has 3 strings or 3 spaces on either side, and let's talk about it from the left side first. So in the case of a left side strip call, we want to loop from here to the end. Okay, so basically we just need to find the first non-space character and then get the rest of the string from there. So ignore everything leading up to the beginning of our actual letters. So similarly, if we do strip cat right, instead of figuring out where we want to start including things, now we know we want to start at 0, but we want to know when we need to stop. So basically there's 2 separate mini problems here depending on the second argument. So if it's left, we need to figure out a new start index. Okay? And if it's right, we need a new end. All right, so let's take a look at how we would do this in code. Okay. All right, so again, I have just a skeleton here. So let's tackle the left side first. So with the left side, I'll draw the example we had just so we have it here. Okay, yeah. So let's just say we have cat again. And so let's just write the indices so we keep ourselves straight. Whoa, okay, I did not mean to do that. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that's an 8. Alrighty. So by default, if we're looping through a string, the start is 0. But if the side that is passed in is left, we know we need to update this start. So what we're going to do is loop through until we find that first C character in this case, but really it's just the first non-space. And that's when we know we found the start. So we're going to loop while the start of our string, not the start of our string, while this string value at our starting index, which is just 0, so this is just like any other counting variable. So while our string at the current index is a space, we want to just keep going, keep ignoring. Okay, so but we also want to make sure we don't run off the end of our string, so we want to make sure that we're bounded by this length as well. All right, so at this point after this loop, we've adjusted our start index if we were stripping from the left. So now the same thing, we want to adjust our ending index if necessary. So by default, when we're looping through a string, the end is just the length minus 1. And that makes sense. But if our side is equal to the right, we want to update the end to be the first non-space character we see coming from the right. So since our end, which is going to be our looping variable here, starts at the length, we're going to be looping backwards. So let's see how that will look. So want to start out the same as the first loop. We just want to say, while this is equal to a space, we just want to keep going. And since we're looping backwards, we're moving our looping variable in the opposite direction. So we're subtracting 1. And we just want to make sure that we don't run off the beginning of our string now. So we just got to make sure that the end is greater than 0. Okay. So after this loop, we should have adjusted our start and end appropriately based on this side argument. So now all that's left to do, let me get rid of this space. All that's left to do is just get the characters that we do want, which should be from within the range of start and end. So we can just say result is equal to the string at index start, and then start is equal to start plus 1. Okay, let me just return our result. All right, and I always think this function is best illustrated by just going through a couple examples to see how it works. So if we wanted to do our cat example just with less spaces, so it's a little quicker. So if we want to go from the left the first time, so I'll just make a note that the length of this string is 7. Okay, so we start out with start being at 0, and we're going down the left side. So, or we passed in the value of side being left. So we check if the value of our string at the start index, which is 0, we check if this is a space currently, and it is, and we check if start is less than our length. So 0 is less than 7. So we're good. So then we can just update start to be 1. And then we go back around again and we check, is the current index or current value at the current index a space again? And it is. And then we check again, is 1 less than 7? And it is. So then start becomes 2. And now we have something a little different. We say, is the value of our string at index 2 a space? And it's not. So we exit this loop and jump down to line 59. So line 59 says set up a variable end that is equal to the length of our string minus 1. So our length was 7, so end is 6. And then it says if side is right, this is not true. So we just skip right down to here and we set up our result. Just it starts out as the empty string. And we say while start is less than end. Okay, so we're less than or equal to end. So we have 2 less than or equal to 6. This is all good. And we add on our string at index 2, which is C. So result becomes C. And we increment start to be 3. 3 is less than 6. So then we go and grab, so we got the C. Now we go and grab this A. So result becomes CA for cat. And then 5, get that right space. And then 6, get that other space. And then this becomes 7, and 7 is not less than or equal to 6. So then we're done. And this is our result. Awesome. I can just go through really quickly how it would go on the end, just because I think looping backwards is worth seeing because it's a little confusing. Okay. All right. So I'm even just going to make it simpler with just one space now, just so we can move a little quicker. But yeah, so we're going from the right this time. So start still starts at a 0, but when this if statement is false, so we just skip it. And so now we jump down to here, and end is, so the length of our string is 5. So end is 4. And this makes sense, right? Because our indexes are 1, 2, 3, 4. So end is 4. And so now we're looping, since this if statement here is true. And we say, is the character at index end a space? And index end is 4, and this is indeed a space. And end 4 is greater than 0, so we subtract 1 and make this 3. All right, and now we check, is our string at index 3 a space? And it's not. That fails, so we exit the loop and jump down here. We set up result to be an empty string, and we're looping from start to end, which is 0 to 3. All right, so result is the result's current value plus start at 0, which is giving us that first space at index 0. Then start becomes 1, result becomes space C, start becomes 2, result becomes space CA, start becomes 3, CAT, start becomes 4, and then the loop stops because 4 is not less than or equal to end. And we return cat stripped from the right. All right, I hope this was helpful.